as the NCAA. A lot of quotes from Rick George, the athletics director at Colorado. You may remember that name. He was I think he was the president of the Texas Rangers in MLB and had some ties to Ole Miss. And at one point, I think like back when they hired Ross Bjork, there was some conversation about Rick George possibly being the athletics director at Ole Miss. That obviously didn't end up happening. He's in Colorado and has been kind of outspoken on this issue. So, Bort, get us up to speed. The news of the day as it pertains to NIL and trying to put the toothpaste back in the tube.
The news of the day, long story short, Ross Dellinger wrote another thing. I think that's 4 separate breaking news items in as many days for Ross, so kudos to him. The NCAA is going to release some guidelines soon, and they're going to actually attempt to investigate these collectives, more specifically, any inducement that was given to a recruit in terms of NIL. That is their goal. They're going to try to enforce this because, as everybody knows, inducements are still against the rules. But it's been pretty wide open. Specifically, Miami and Texas have basically been, hey, well, not Miami football like the head coach or Steve Sarkisian or whatever, but they've had collectives saying, hey, when you come here, we're going to pay you this amount of money. Come on down. And they've been wide open about it, so the NCAA is going to try, as they might, despite being short-staffed, among other things, lacking in competence, are going to try to stop it.
Say, hey, Dad, what are those other things? Borky out.
Lacking incompetence.
Incompetence. That's a fair summation.
So they're going to try to stop it. And then there was another addition, if you will, from Pat Forty that said he got a message from somebody in compliance at the NCAA that the student athletes that are getting these offers are going to be required to talk about it. They are not, I don't know how you enforce this. I don't know what you do, but they're going to be required to sit down with the NCAA.
You exactly what they're going to do. They're going to hang their eligibility over their head.
But that's, according to 40 anyway, eligibility won't be impacted.
Unless eligibility won't be impacted based on what they have received or what they have been offered. Hide and watch and wait and see if they don't dangle eligibility over these kids' head. If they're like, no, I'm not going to talk to you about this.
You know that's exactly what's going to happen, but that's what they're pretending is not. It's a good idea in theory. As I've said multiple times this week, I think the best thing for college football is to have this operate in the shadows again so people can pretend like the game is pure, even though it never has been. And this is a good first step to do that. This is a good first step. Now, can you actually have any kind of teeth to do this job? Because remember, the FBI gift-wrapped multiple investigations for the NCAA. The NCAA had to do nothing to LSU. Nothing. The FBI gave it to them. And we are 5 years later, and Will Wade still doesn't know what his punishment is. So
he knows what part of his punishment is. Unemployment.
That, but you get my point. Is I mean, if you have investigations that have been gift wrapped for you, why should anybody be afraid of this? I do think they're going to go find a scalp, though, and I have a feeling it's either in Miami, Florida, or Austin, Texas.
Which would kind of fly in the face of the way it's been authorized sometimes. You know, so mad at Miami and Texas that Kent State gets the death penalty.
They're going to go after a big boy because. Everybody knows Miami's been offering inducements because they've been telling everybody they've been offering inducements. Go hammer them. People will operate in the shadows, and everybody wins. Hopefully.
You know, we can get into this later in the 5 o'clock hour if we want to, but the fact that Ole Miss has kind of moved slow and cautiously with the Grove Collective, and that Mississippi State is in the process of, but is moving very deliberately with plenty of legal oversight in its collective offering, maybe a good thing. Maybe a good thing.
Just so you know, I was texting with Ross earlier today, and I told him I would send him money if he didn't write anything NIL related next week. So we'll see if he does that.
Mm-hmm. How much do you offer to send him?
A couple $100.
Wonder what Sports Illustrated is paying him.
He can find other stories.
So, Borky, we kind of touched on that at the end of the 4 o'clock hour. There's a lot there. And I'm having trouble, one, wrapping my mind around the logistics of, and two, getting excited about the proper implementation of retroactively enforcing rules that for a year you have just allowed to. I mean, it's like the speed limit on a road is 65. And everybody knows that it's 65, but nowhere on that road, for a 60-mile stretch, nowhere can you find a speed limit sign. And so, are you really supposed to only drive 65 on it? Or maybe the better example would be a road is 55, and you're not sure if it's a 55-mile-an-hour speed limit or a 65-mile-an-hour speed limit, and you don't see a speed limit sign anywhere, and so you go 65, or maybe you push it up to 70 or 75 because that's what you do when you're in a 65, but now all of a sudden you're 20 miles over the speed limit as opposed to just 10. Is that what we're talking about here? Like, there was a speed limit sign posted as it pertains to NIL, but there were no speed limit signs anywhere. There were no troopers on the road trying to slow you down, and everybody, some more so than others, but everybody was driving fast.
That's a good analogy. The one I was thinking of is when somebody on Halloween doesn't want to answer the door or will not be home, and they put a bowl of candy out and say, please take one. And everybody's willing to take a couple. I mean, there's that one kid that'll take one because it's a good kid and the parents are doing a really good job raising them. But most kids run up there and grab a handful. And that's what they do. But they don't do too much because either the light's on or there's a car in the driveway. Well, the lights are off and nobody's home. And now all the kids know it. So they're just going to grab the bucket and pour it into their pillowcase, which is what I used as a kid because you could fit more. You didn't have to go home. That was the analogy that I thought of, was the lights are off and nobody's home, and there's a bowl of Halloween candy right there, and everybody's just grabbing it.
Well, but now what we're finding out is retroactively there were traffic cameras there, even though you saw no speed limit signs and nobody was enforcing the rules, but the traffic camera took some pictures, and we're going to send tickets out a year later.
And we'll get one. I mean, that's the thing I keep going back to, is they don't have, it's mentioned in Ross's story, they can't do anything. They can't enforce all of this. They admit that. They don't have the staff. They make $1 billion a year, and somehow they don't have the staff. It's amazing how that happens. But I do think they will shoot a gun at a very large target. They're going elephant hunting, I think, with this. With everything that's been read and talked about and written, I think that Miami or Texas is going to be in their crosshairs. They've got enough evidence as it is, and they're going to bring down a big old elephant and scare everybody else into the they're going to scare everybody else away to where they go back to operating underneath. I think that's the goal here. I think it's pretty transparent because when they admit they can't staff it, that's what they're saying. They have enough staff to go get somebody, and they're going to hope everybody else falls in line. And there's a couple somebodies they can get. Hell, they can get BYU. BYU's got an inducement NIL thing going right now that they are publicly talking about.
Is it an inducement? Is there, I thought the BYU thing at the beginning was every single student athlete.
That's not NIL. That's an inducement. That's against their rules. They could go that route if they wanted to.
But, I mean, BYU would argue that they are using those student athletes to promote, whatever.
You know as good as anybody, sometimes the arguments don't matter. No matter how good they are, they don't matter. Southern Miss in basketball had a heck of an argument. They had a great case. Didn't matter. The star witness in the case for Southern Miss changed the story 3 times. Didn't matter. So,
yeah.
But no, more likely, if I were them, if I were sitting up in Indianapolis, I would say, go get me Miami. Stop what you're doing. Go get me Miami.
Here's my pushback on all of this. The
Real
NCAA.
quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
Miami would be in the repeat violators window still, wouldn't they?
They could absolutely smoke them if they wanted to.
They could destroy them. Yeah.
The thing about Miami, though, is it's a directive there, not a collective, which we learned the difference in earlier. It's this one guy, and he's paying guys, and they're doing advertisements specifically for his company.
I'm fat. I'm not obese.
But it's an
That's what we're
inducement.
talking about. Semantics.
That they are publicizing that when you sign with Miami, this is what you will get. That's inducement, and that's against the rules as they are written. And as a voluntary member of the organization,
I think you're going to have a hard time doing this. Here's my concern, Borky. My biggest concern. The Supreme Court has told the NCAA they've ruled in favor of Austin. And Justice Kavanaugh, Brett Kavanaugh, says if we come back and we have to hear another case, this was a narrow ruling, you'll be ruled against again. The Supreme Court of the United States has said you can't tamp down the ability for student athletes to make money.
but that's all that they've. I mean, it depends on whose lawyer's better, I suppose. But
yeah, and guess what? The NCAA's lawyer has not been better repeatedly. And so is this where we're going to go again? We're going to get – that's the reason we're here in the first place, is because the Supreme Court opened the door and states were tired of lawsuits, and the NCAA had they were impotent to do anything about it. And they know they're going to get slapped again. And so if you create a cap, if you say, no, you can't be compensated for this, are we not going to get right back to square one where the Supreme Court says, well, yeah, actually you can be compensated for that, and here's another $1 billion fine, and you have to go pay all these people? I don't understand how we think we're going to accomplish this again. Does that not make sense?
It does. But this isn't capping the college players. It's stopping the inducement. That's the line here, is they're not trying to stop Miami players from getting any. They're trying to stop Miami from promising players they're going to get some, which is against the rules that Miami agrees to abide by.
Yeah, but there are a lot of rules that a lot of schools agreed to abide by before their state laws changed.
But, I mean, weed's legal in certain states. You can still get suspended for a failed drug test.
You're right.
There are things that I can show up here to work in shorts and a T-shirt every day. It's not against the law. But the bosses sure, as you know what, can fire me if I do. Because I voluntarily agreed.
Can't relate.
I voluntarily agreed to be a part of this company, so I have to follow their rules. Miami or whoever voluntarily agrees to be a part of the NCAA, so they have to follow their rules. Nobody says that any school has to be in the NCAA. Well, you could argue monopoly and stuff, but that's not what's on the table here.